Most spellcasters gain the ability to cast 6th level spells at level 11. So in this list, we'll be going over 10 of the best 6th level spells you might be able to pick up once you get there. Starting off at number 10, we have Otto's Freezing Sphere. This spell is just a huge AoE with a 60-foot radius that deals 10d6 cold damage to all targets that fail a Constitution saving throw, taking half as much on a success. As this spell has a 300-foot range, you can throw this very far away in order to make sure it doesn't hit you or any of your allies. Because if you use this thing anywhere near the battlefield, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have some friendly fire, due to its 60-foot radius, which is gigantic. It's literally 3 times as big as a fireball. Although it does deal less damage than a fireball if you simply upcast it to 6th level. But you're giving up a little bit of damage on this thing in order to just have a massive range and radius. Some other niche uses of Freezing Sphere is it can also freeze bodies of water, so you can throw it into a lake in order to freeze a large amount of it, or even use it to freeze a river so you can just walk across. The ice lasts for 1 minute and even traps creatures that were in the water when it got frozen, requiring them to make a strength check in order to break free. You could also choose not to fire the ability and just keep it as a small globe the size of a sling bullet, where at any time you or a creature that you give the globe to can throw it for the full effect. Or you can even launch it with a sling to have a longer range, since if you throw it as a globe, it only has a maximum range of 40 feet, where it explodes and has the same exact effect as if you casted it normally. You can also set down the globe and have it shatter itself after 1 minute, so you can set up a trap with it if you so choose. Another thing you can do is, if you have the 9th level spell Time Stop, you can actually create multiple Freezing Spheres during the Time Stop, as it's one of the few ways to prepare extra damage during a Time Stop, because it doesn't require concentration. You can also just hand the globes off to friendly party members who can throw them as well. Now, there is another spell with the same radius called Circle of Death, where it deals the exact same damage as the 3rd level spell Fireball, at 86, but with a 60-foot radius. However, with only a 150-foot range instead of the 300 feet that Otto's Freezing Sphere has. But Circle of Death is necrotic damage, which is not as resisted as cold damage. However, they both target Constitution saves, which are typically pretty bad saves to target, because most monsters have a high Constitution score. So if you're just looking for a wide radius blast spell that doesn't require too much complicated thinking or concentrations, Otto's Freezing Sphere and Circle of Death are kind of the 2 options available at 6th level. And at number 9, we have Globe of Invulnerability. This spell creates a 10-foot radius sphere around you where you and anyone else inside of it are immune to 5th level or lower spells from outside the barrier. However, you can cast spells inside the barrier as much as you want, including to attack other creatures. So, the main benefit of Globe of Invulnerability, since it does require full action and your concentration to keep it up, is if you really don't want to be counterspelled. Because one of the little niches of Globe of Invulnerability is the fact that it doesn't matter if the spell is upcast or not, it only counts the spell's base level. So even if an enemy creature casts counterspell at the 6th level, to bypass the 5th level limit, you're still immune to it because it was originally a 3rd level spell. It also protects you from AoE effects, so if someone tries to throw a fireball at you, you're just straight up immune to it. Being able to become immune to spells is pretty great. The problem is there aren't a lot of spellcasters in the game casting spells on players, and technically a dragon's flame breath is not counted as a spell, so it will hit you through a Globe of Invulnerability no problem. And also, this spell does require a full action to cast as well as your concentration to keep up, so you really have to give up your first round of combat in order to gain its effects. And the spell itself can be counterspelled anyway, so there's a chance you won't even be able to get it up if you're trying to not be counterspelled. There is a way to mitigate this a bit, however, due to the range of counterspell, as it has a range of 60 feet, so if you cast this and then let the enemies come to you, it could still help you out. This brings us to the second issue with this spell, in that creatures can just kind of walk into the globe. So if they want to beat you up in melee, they can. Also, Globe of Invulnerability can be dispelled with Dispel Magic, even though it's a 3rd level spell. And that's because the target is the Globe of Invulnerability itself, and not something inside the globe. Now, there is another pretty good defensive spell that was also added recently called Fizban's Platinum Shield, which doesn't give you immunity to magic like Globe of Invulnerability, but only requires a bonus action to cast, and it lets you grant a friendly target a +2 to their AC, resistance to 5 common damage types, and evasion, where you take no damage if you succeed a dexterity save from a spell or effect which would normally take half damage. You can move this shield around to another target with subsequent bonus actions as long as you keep your concentration up. So when it comes to protecting yourself with 6th level spells, these 2 spells do a pretty good job, but there is one at a higher spot on this list that is just a little bit better. And at number 8, we have Chain Lightning. This is a spell which can hit a total of 4 targets, 1 creature of your choice within 150 feet, as well as 3 others that are within 30 feet of the first target. A Chain Lightning deals an average of 45 damage to each target. Now, when you compare this with single target spells, if you look at 5th level, we have Animate Objects, which deals an average of 65 damage to 1 target in 1 turn. So, from a single target point of view, it's definitely not as good as a spell of a lower level, or even other spells at the same level, as Disintegrate deals 75 damage on average to a single target, and Harm deals 49 damage, and even Summon Fiend deals 48 damage if all 3 of its multi-attacks hit. Although, Chain Lightning is not single target damage, it bounces to 3 other targets for full damage. So, if you're able to hit 4 targets with Chain Lightning, that's 180 damage on average. Now, if you just hit a whole bunch of creatures with either Otto Freezing Sphere or Circle of Death, you're going to deal way more than 180 damage. However, this is where the main benefit of Chain Lightning comes in, and that's the fact that you can fire it into the middle of your martial characters and not hit a single one of them, while hitting 4 targets of your choice. It's one of the few AoE spells that has built-in friendly fire protection, and it deals a lot of damage to those 4 targets. And even if you simply hit 2 targets, you beat all of the single target spells and damage at this level, which don't last over multiple turns. Because technically Sunbeam can use its effect 10 times with 1 spell slot, as it hits all creatures within a 60-foot line and deals 27 damage on average to each target. So, eventually, 1 casting of Sunbeam can beat the damage of Chain Lightning as well, but Sunbeam doesn't have friendly fire protection either. So while you may technically be able to do more damage with one of the other AoE spells by hitting a whole bunch more targets, and you can technically hit harder with some of the single target spells if you're fighting a single target, a lot of combat encounters don't really have massive amounts of enemies anyway. So you might be hitting all of your opponents with 1 casting of a Chain Lightning, and getting the maximum amount of damage from those 4 targets hit. So the usefulness of the spell is dependent on your campaign and what creatures you're fighting, but in pretty much every game that I've ran, Chain Lightning would be able to hit around half of the creatures in a standard combat encounter, whereas the other AoE spells that can hit all of them would also be hitting the rest of your party as well. And at number 7, we have Hero's Feast. This is a really expensive spell to cast, as it consumes 1,000 gold pieces and materials each time you use it. However, when used, it allows 12 people to spend an hour eating the food it conjures, which cures them of all diseases and poisons, and makes them immune to poison and being frightened for 24 hours. As well as giving them advantage in all their wisdom saving throws during the same duration. And lastly, it increases their maximum hit points by 2d10, also healing them for the same amount. Now, what's really great about this ability is that it lasts for 24 hours, so technically, you could use this at the end of the day with a spare spell slot and carry the benefits over into the next day, just having a passive immunity to poison in the frightened condition, which are 2 things that come up a lot when fighting against average monsters, as well as having advantage on all wisdom saves, which is even better, as wisdom saves are often the most important ones to succeed, as failure typically results in a lost control effect instead of pure damage like a dexterity save does. And the maximum hit point increase you gain stacks with other maximum hit points increases, like Aid, as well as temporary hit points, since it technically doesn't count as temp HP. So, if you're looking for an excellent buff to give your whole party, and you have more gold than you know what to do with, casting Hero's Feast at the end of every night with a spare 6th level spell slot is going to give you the most bang for your buck. And at number 6, we have Heal. This is a healing spell which is only available to clerics and druids, and all it does is use your action in order to cause 1 target to regain 70 hit points, as well as remove 3 minor status debuffs. When it comes to a healing spell that is just very efficient for its spell level, Heal is definitely one of the best, and is going to be very useful for getting a party member to full health around the 11th level when you can first take this spell, and even a significant amount of health at higher levels in later tiers of play. The status debuffs it cures aren't super common or very important, but it is a nice little bit of icing on the cake, although you will still need greater restoration in order to remove all the more nasty effects. And at number 5, we have Otto's Irresistible Dance. This is a spell that, when cast on a target, causes them to start dancing in place, where during their turn they have to use all of their movement to dance in place, and it also gives them disadvantage on dexterity saves and all of their attack rolls, and more importantly, making it so that all attack rolls against them are done at advantage. And if the creature wants to end the effect on themselves, they have to wait until their turn, where they have to use an action in order to perform a wisdom saving throw, ending the effect on a success. Now, you may be thinking that just basically applying the restrained condition to a target is not worth a 6th level spell slot, especially since the target still gains their actions and doesn't actually stop them from anything other than moving. However, one of the things to note about this spell is the fact that there's no saving throw for applying the spell in the first place. Unless the target is immune to being charmed, they're affected by the spell as soon as it's cast on them, so it bypasses a boss monster's legendary resistances. That's the power of this spell, being able to place a debuff on a target which gives you advantage to all your party's attacks, without having to worry about a legendary resistance stopping the control effect. And it can even cause them to lose their turn if they choose to use an action in order to end the effect, as they don't gain an automatic try at the end of the turn on damage like most other control spell effects have. And at number 4, we have Mass Suggestion. This is a spell that basically casts the second level suggestion spell, but on 12 targets. It doesn't require concentration, and lasts for 24 hours. As long as the creatures can hear and understand you and aren't immune to being charmed, you can give them a command that's 2 sentences or less, which they have to follow as long as it's reasonable and they failed a wisdom saving throw. So, if you tell them all to just kill themselves, then the effect won't take hold. However, if you encounter an enemy group of creatures, and there's 12 or less of them, you can basically instantly win the encounter by just telling them all to go away. You can just tell them to go take a hike, go walk in the other direction, go home, whatever you can think of, because it's real easy to just instantly end an encounter with Mass Suggestion. Especially since you're able to use it on up to 12 targets at once. And if you're creative, you can do even more with those 2 sentences. It works on big creatures as well, so you can convince an entire group of giants to stop attacking the town. So even at the higher levels, it remains useful. Although all the giants would have to be within 60 feet of you when you cast the spell, so positioning would be quite important. Even if you can't hit everyone, immediately eliminating half of an enemy party with Mass Suggestion is pretty good crowd control. And if you want to be more devious with Mass Suggestion, you can increase the duration of the effect by quite a lot by upcasting the spell, where it can last up to 10 days if you upcast at the 7th level, and a year and a day if cast at 9th. And at number 3, we have Eyebite. This is a spell that lasts for 1 minute, where every turn you get to choose one of the 3 crowd control effects you want to inflict on a target within 60 feet of you, where you choose a target who must succeed a wisdom saving throw, and on failure, they either fall asleep until they take damage or are shaken awake by someone else, be panicked, where on each of their turns they have to take the dash action to run away from you, or you can sicken the target, which gives them disadvantage on their attacks and ability checks. They get to make another wisdom saving throw at the end of each of their turns in order to end the effect early, but even a single turn of this effect can be devastating. Sicken is not as good as the other 2, because being able to put someone to sleep just completely removes them from the encounter, or allows one of your allies to hit with advantage and an automatic crit if they decide to attack anyway. And if you panic them, you can also attack them while they're running away, and they're not able to break the frightened effect unless they're both able to move more than 60 feet away and out of line of sight of you. So depending on where you fear a target, they might not be able to meet the conditions to break the effect, and you can just fear them into a corner where they can't do anything, and you can attack them without them being able to use their actions to fight back, as they're forced to use their action to dash. And unlike the other spells that have similar effects, what makes Eyebite especially good is the fact that you can just keep doing this every turn with a single spell slot. So basically you get to spend each of your turns trying to control a different target, but you only have to spend a single spell slot to do so, instead of having to cast a whole bunch of other control spells using more spell slots. If a target succeeds a save, you can't target them again unless you recast the spell, but still, the main benefit of Eyebite is that you just get so much mileage out of one spell slot, even if you're only affecting one target per turn. And at number 2, we have Contingency. This is a spell which has the effect that when you cast it, you can choose one of the other spells you can cast that's 5th level or below, and then create a condition where the spell will be cast instantly, once the condition is met, no matter how vague or specific you are. Although there are some limitations to it, the spell you choose can only be one that requires one action to cast, and it has to be one that can target you. And it also uses both your 6th level spell slot to cast Contingency in addition to the spell slot of the spell that you want the Contingency to cast. It also costs 1,500 gold pieces to cast, but that is not consumed when you use it. So, what makes Contingency really good is the fact that it lasts for 10 days with no concentration. So just like with Hero's Feast, you can just use this on a day where you have a spare 6th level spell slot in order to set it up for later use. For example, you could create the condition that, if you drop below 20 hit points, you cast Otto's Resilient Sphere, which is a 4th level spell that basically encases you in a bubble that makes you impervious to harm. Though a Disintegrate spell can crack this bubble, nothing else can get through it. You could also make the condition very simple so that you just activate whatever you want as a free action. Like, if I blink my eyes twice in quick succession, then invisibility is cast on me. Some people also like to use Contingency to let them cast Dimension Door, however, some DMs would require the direction of the Dimension Door to be set when you cast Contingency, making this option not available to all players. Contingency is a spell that really allows you to use your imagination. So while normally you can't use Otto's Resilient Sphere to save yourself, as it requires an action to cast, but it can be used to save yourself with Contingency, as it's just a simple condition. You can get really specific with it if you want, and have something like, if I cast Counterspell in reaction to a spell targeting me, and that Counterspell fails, and the spell targeting me has a lingering effect on me, then cast Dispel Magic. And since the effect lasts for 10 days, you will eventually have a day where you have a spare 6th level spell slot. So once you have Contingency, chances are you're always going to have one of them active. And at number 1, we have Mental Prison. This is basically a single target damaging ability which has the highest amount of potential single target damage of any spell until 9th level, where only Meteor Swarm beats it in single target damage. Even beating out 7th level spells, like Finger of Death or Delayed Blast Fireball that has been fully charged. As what this spell does is one target within 60 feet that's not immune to being charmed has to succeed an intelligence saving throw, where if they fail, they take 5d10 psychic damage, and they are immediately surrounded in an illusion that can be whatever you want. But whatever the illusion is, the target can't see or hear anything beyond it. And if the target moves out of the illusion, attacks it, or reaches any body part through it, they immediately take an additional 10d10 psychic damage and the spell ends. However, if they succeed the original saving throw, they still take 5d10 psychic damage and then the spell ends with no illusion. So, if they fail and then walk through the illusion, they take 15d10 psychic damage, or around 83 damage on average, which is 8 more damage than the Disintegrate spell, and 21 more damage than Finger of Death, which is a 7th level single target blast spell. One of the main benefits of Mental Prison over some of the other harder hitting high level single target spells is that it actually deals damage on a failed save, whereas Disintegrate simply fizzles out and does nothing. It also targets an excellent saving throw with Intelligence, which a vast majority of creatures in the monster manual are lacking in. Really, the only point against Mental Prison is the fact that it doesn't work on creatures who are immune to being charmed, which a lot of boss monsters sadly are. But still, if you land a Mental Prison on something, chances are they're going to fail the saving throw and then take a ton of damage, unless they have legendary resistances to auto-succeed. But they will still take 28 damage on average from the initial 5d10, which is about the damage that a fireball deals to a single target. Now, a single target damaging ability probably isn't better than Contingency, Eyebite, or even Mass Suggestion, which can completely end an encounter. But it is the hardest hitting single target spell into the 9th level, and a lot of people like to just do damage with their spells rather than using the overly complicated control spells, which are technically better. So, when it comes to big single target damage, you can't really beat Mental Prison. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other 6th level spells that I may have missed that should have definitely taken a spot on this list? Or do you have ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, I'd love to hear about both of those things down in the comments.